Today's episode of the Bitcoin Show is brought to you by Mt. Gox and Thank You Economy Book and MemoryDealers.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bitcoin Show. I'm Bruce Wagner, as you know, and today we have really big news. You may have walked past a newsstand and seen the December issue of Wired magazine. Well, right here, it's all about Bitcoin. So it's an article called The Rise and Fall of Bitcoin by a man named Benjamin Wallace. And those of you in the New York Bitcoin community probably know him, but he's our guest today. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Bruce. Good to be here. Good, thanks.
You good? Yeah. Wow. You were basically an embedded journalist into the Bitcoin community here in New York, right? I mean, you were hanging out at all the meetups and the convention, the conference, everything.
Yep.
Do you always get so immersed in your story?
When I have the luxury to, time-wise, and also when the subject is so interesting that I want to spend as much time in it as I can, and Bitcoin was one of the most interesting stories I've worked on in a while.
And how long did you work on writing this story?
I mean, the actual writing of it, maybe a week, but the reporting and research was several months. I'm trying to, probably 3 months.
That's what I thought, about 3 months.
Yeah.
Just research and note-taking and all that. And then
just talking to a lot of people, coming to your meetups, coming to the convention, buying some Bitcoins and playing around with them to sort of see what it was like to buy them, to see what it was like to use them and store them, and just expose myself to Bitcoin in as many different ways as I could. Cool.
So, I mean, obviously I look at you as a friend because you're just like another one of the Bitcoin guys here in New York. I mean, everybody knows you here, but people around the world may not have seen you yet, only your name. But I was going to say, how had you heard of Bitcoin before? Like, were you assigned this story or did you pitch this story?
I was assigned this story. I'd never heard of Bitcoin.
Really?
I write about all different sorts of things, not tech specifically. I mean, I've written for Wired before, but not a lot. And my editor said, "Hey, have you heard of Bitcoin?" And I said no, and he started telling me about it, and it sounded so interesting that I was excited to work on it, but it was the first I'd heard of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long ago how long before you started the story? Was that like right away?
I mean, that's right away, and then I kind of got going
right away.
You
started researching it.
Yeah, maybe a couple of weeks, but yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. That's so cool. All right, now, since you finished writing the story, and it's on the newsstands now, have you stayed involved in what's going on with Bitcoin, or just?
I mean, I have a Bitcoin Google alert, so I am pretty. I pretty much get the daily digest of what's going on.
Yeah.
I also receive, the Bitcoin Google group digest.
Bitcoin
so yeah, I mean, I'm generally up on it, but I haven't been as immersed in it as I was.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so all right.
I keep watching to see if my Bitcoins are going to, regain the value they had when I bought them. But
exactly. So I want to talk about that too. Well, speaking of that, that's what I wanted to talk about is the title, The Rise and Fall of Bitcoin. There's so much power in a title, and I don't know what, I'm making this number up, but I'm guessing at least half the people who see an article somewhere just read the title and don't have time to read the article. Question, did you come up with the title, or was that assigned by...
Yeah, I did not come up with a title, but I also, I think it's a fair title. I mean, I think that, a big point of a headline is to get people to read the story. So, you're definitely going to err on the side of making it interesting, making it dramatic.
Yeah.
Having said that, I mean, if you look at Bitcoin just in terms of its valuation, it clearly has had a dramatic rise and fall. I understand that there are people in the community who might object to saying that it has fallen because it's still here and they view the rise as a bubble in the first place. But on the other hand, I don't think that fall means death. It's not the rise and death of Bitcoin, and it could be, the next chapter could be another rise. But I do think that in certain pretty important senses, there has been a fall.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. So the only reason I ask is, well, because of that, you basically said it, is that it can be read, and I guess that's the cleverness of a title, that it makes it newsy, that it's like, oh, it's dramatic and whatever. And does that mean it's dead, or does that mean the price rose and fell? And how do you could take it more than one way.
Sure.
Obviously, the price has risen and fallen. So on that level, there's that issue, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then the other is the the death of Bitcoin, but obviously it's not dead.
Obviously, it's not dead.
Right.
I mean, there's certainly. I think there are some other ways in which you could say there's been a rise and fall. Certainly, in terms of media, exposure and interest. I think there was a rise and fall. I mean, there was a real intense sort of media moment
Frenzy.
for Bitcoin
Yeah.
that has kind of receded, and probably the breadth and diversity of people interested in Bitcoin is not what it was at that height. I mean, I think there were people who came in as speculators who maybe have now retreated from the market, and now it's really, in some ways, it's maybe a healthier, more solid, just group of people who are, really interested in building Bitcoin and aren't interested in the
Speculating, gambling.
in sort of the daily moves of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's another question is that, do you think that the media frenzy was a result of the price going up from the speculation, or do you think the speculation was a result of the media frenzy, or is it a chicken and egg kind
I think
of thing?
it's a spiral. I mean, I think,
Cyclic
you can definitely track certain spikes in the price to media events. Like there was a Forbes story online that caused the price to, I think, triple or more, actually much more than triple. I think it went up like 10 or 20 fold. Then Gawker had that story about Silk Road that caused it to triple again to 30. But every time that happened, it just caused more and more, press attention. And then the spiral works in reverse on the way down.
Right.
When it starts falling, then there's a negative story, and then that causes
more negative. That's true. I think you're absolutely right. In fact, I've been, I usually don't obsess about the price or anything. And people ask me, "What's the price of Bitcoin today?" And I'm like, I don't know. I only check when you ask me.
What is the price of Bitcoin today?
It's interesting because I just pulled it up on my little widget, and I have noticed that since the Wired story, every time I've checked, it's been higher than the previous time. Okay, it's not going up like 30 times its value, but I think it was 220 something, and then 230 something, then 240 something, and then 248 this morning. Now it's 253. So I like that, actually. I like that slower, steadier growth.
Right.
Speaking of the value of Bitcoin, actually I was rereading the article this morning on the way in, and the quote where I said that this is definitely not a stock. It seems like it's just going to go up, up, up. Obviously, speculation makes it go up and down, like a roller coaster. But I still kind of stand by the basic premise. But here's the thing: when the price of Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin goes up and down and up and down and up and down, obviously all that noise. Up and down is speculation, obviously. I mean, what else could it be? But if you take the bottoms, like every time it drops, and then you connect the dots of the bottoms, and you just make that curve of the bottom value, that's the more realistic value. And going from 6 cents to what it is now, $2.53 in 1 year, is something like 4,900%. So that's the thing I remind people that, true, it's gone to $30, but that's all speculation noise. Don't buy it when it's high. Hello.
Right.
Buy it when it's low. Connect the dots when it's low. Don't buy it as a 1-month investment or a 3-month investment. Think of it as a lifetime investment. And if you're going to invest in it, this is how I view it. And also, the fact that gold went up 25% last year. Silver went up 50%, and Bitcoin went up 4,900% or whatever, depending on how you calculate it. It's still an amazing investment. It's just people who bought it when it was $20 or something are going to be they're not going to look at it that way when it's $2. But it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. Do you think that there's going to be continuing speculation, or do you think it's really stabilized and it's going to be a real steady growth curve from this point on?
I mean, I feel, given how volatile it's been so far, I can't imagine that people who are doing it purely for speculation are going to rush in now because they've seen what can happen with it. Yeah. I mean, were it to undergo another dramatic spurt and go back up to 30 in a short time, I'm sure a whole new set of people would be attracted to thinking, hey, this is a get-rich-quick scheme. But I would think that now the people who buy it are going to buy it because they want to use it, they want to take part in this community, they want to take part in this currency. But I would think that a lot fewer people would be inclined to do what Rick Falkvinge of the Swedish Pirate Party did, which was, at least what he said he was going to do, was put his entire life savings into Bitcoin. I think a more prudent approach might be to put some of your money into Bitcoin and still leave some of yours in the traditional banking system.
Yeah, I wonder if we know what the price of Bitcoin was when he wrote that article, or if he did.
It was he's definitely lost money if he put his money in then. I mean, I don't remember. Was it? I think it might have been. I don't know if it was at 30. It might have already come down a
Wow.
bit, but maybe it was in the 20s. I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably before that. Yeah, interesting. Well, anyway, I hope he left it in there and it keeps growing because I mean, my opinion is that it'll go back up again, but it's just crazy to triple, in a week. And actually there was a long period of time where it was averaging out doubling every week. If you calculate that out, it's crazy, just crazy, insane growth. But that's always a red flag, like when Yahoo stock did that or Google stock did that, it's like really dangerous time. But it's like day trading. It's like anything, speculative. But it's very, very prudent to just look at the lows, in my opinion. So what about, okay, then the other issue is security, obviously, with it being cash-like. It's a whole new thing of electronic cash is different than any other kind of cash we've ever had, where there's a central distribution point that can reverse transactions and prosecute people for doing things that are wrong. It's not easy to do with Bitcoin. That's the whole point of it, is that it's decentralized, and it really literally is like gold. You can steal it and run off and it's gone. So between the bank heists of my Bitcoin and Bitcoin 7, you know about that?
No.
Yeah.
What's Bitcoin 7?
I heard that it disappeared and took everybody's money.
Another online wallet service?
It's actually, well, it was an exchange site. There were red flags when the site came up, and another exchange site accused them of copying and pasting all the text. It was just like really sketchy. Oh, and then the worst thing actually was before that, when they contacted me. They emailed a lot of the key people in the forum and key people in the Bitcoin community and offered to pay us to say good things about it. And I was like, oh my gosh. I posted the email that they sent to me, and I'm like, this sounds sketchy. And sure enough, apparently I heard that they shut down and kept everybody's money. So that's going to happen. And now e-wallets are springing up like weeds all over the place. So it's sure to happen a lot more. Right.
I moved my money off of. I mean, I only bought not a lot of Bitcoins, but enough to play with, and I used to keep them in an exchange, and I moved them into a personal desktop solution.
Yeah.
Just because there's just too many of these exchanges that had problems.
You got to make sure that it's not like Windows, or even Mac viruses are gonna show up. Viruses are already in the wild in Windows that will grab and steal your wallet.
Right.
Now the new version of which leads to the next thing, the security as far as application development, it hasn't been as fast as I anticipated, because I thought within a month or 2 or 3 it's going to be here, but it is. They're coming, and so in the next couple episodes we're going to be demonstrating some of these new apps that actually are super, super sophisticated. The standard Bitcoin client now encrypts your wallet. There have been some bugs that they're working out with that, but it's in development. That's the standard client, but now there are some other open source clients which actually do more. They encrypt your wallet from the beginning, and then they back up an encrypted copy to a server using this standard server, which is all open source software. So you can pick the server you trust, but it doesn't matter because the whole thing is encrypted anyway. So it's all free open source software, and it's encrypted anyway before it's backed up. So literally, if you have your app on your phone or your laptop, you could drop your laptop or your phone in the lake, and it wouldn't matter. You could, in the sense that you could retrieve that as long as you remember your secret password you print out and have at home.
Right.
So it's really smart software that's coming. So I believe it's just like in a couple days it'll be available. So between the media attention of Wired magazine, your story, and these new apps finally coming to market, I think that Bitcoin's time is actually still yet to come. I think it's going to be interesting. So what was the most intriguing part of the research that you did?
I think the most interesting thing to me was just the amount of creativity, because this entirely new economy was being created. And so there's just all these people doing such neat things, like, whether it's an entirely new, TV show about this thing, or, Mark Soups in Brooklyn who's, creating a Bitcoin ATM, or, people talking about Bitcoins as collectibles and, trading, with the Genesis block fetch, numismatic value of Bitcoins.
Crazy.
Even stuff like Silk Road and the the Tor sites. That's pretty fascinating to see these sort of black markets arise that use Bitcoin. So all of those all of these things. It's almost just watching like a new world come into being.
Yeah.
It reminds me of I lived in the Czech Republic after the fall of communism, and it was like, they were just transitioning to this entirely new way of being, and all the institutions and businesses and sort of ways of living and working that we take for granted had to be kind of created from scratch, and there's just a lot of dynamism and brain power and creativity that makes it really interesting.
And form follows function, so whenever there's a need and people coming up with creative ideas, it's true. And that's why I love traveling, because you go to different cultures and different economies, and you get ideas of, wow, look how they sell things like in this place. This is a convenient way to do it. We should do that. And the brainstorming, it's really cool. We did, I think it was the last episode we did on this site called Bets of Bitcoin, which is another innovative thing. It's where you can, and there's more than one, but this particular one, you could put any statement you want and then bet on it. And it's obviously gambling, but then again, it's Bitcoin. So as the founder was pointing out, it may not be technically illegal because it's just, legally speaking, it's funny money. It's just digits we're betting for. It's like play money, like Monopoly money. So we'll see how that pans out. But it's interesting, though, another thing you can do with it. You can just bet, you can put any statement you want on who's going to get elected or what sports team's going to win or if it's going to rain on Friday, anything you want.
What Bitcoin's going to be worth in 10 years.
Yeah, right, exactly. Your article reminded me of the 10,000 Bitcoin spent on 2 pizzas. Oh my god.
Yeah, the 100 and, or what was it, the 200 and something $1,000 pizza, pepperoni pizza,
Yeah, 287 or something.
I know.
Crazy. And then, of course, now it's gone way down, so it's only, whatever, $30,000 pizza.
Right. I know, that's crazy. It's still a $30,000 pizza.
I know, right? even so, it's much more realistic, the current price. So what else? Do you have, okay, so after all of your extensive research and interviews and all that, who do you really think Satoshi is?
Believe me, I mean, I know a lot of people think it's sort of silly to be so interested in who Satoshi is, and some people think it's unimportant, and some people think, leave the guy alone. And I say, it's human nature to be intrigued by a mystery.
Yeah.
Satoshi made himself mysterious. I say, it's fair game, and I would love to know who Satoshi is. I tried, my darndest to figure it out. I talked to as many sort of smart people as I could who might know something about it. I talked to all the people who had been named as suspects, and they all denied it. And in general, if someone flat out denies it, I assume they're telling the truth. All I can say is what I ended up with, which was more of a profile of who Satoshi might be than a name or a job or a company. And again, based on what these other more informed people said, including some of the developers of Bitcoin, this profile suggests it's someone with academic training, but not necessarily a PhD, maybe just a master's. Someone probably who's British in origin, or at least speaks British English. Possibly someone around the age of 50 based on their style of programming notation. Beyond that, I really have no idea. I mean, I'm pretty confident it's not a Japanese person in spite of his name. I don't know. Do you know?
No, I don't know. I'll be quick to deny that I know. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think your profile sounds accurate from what I've learned and heard and whatever. But then again, we've heard the same things. Did you read the New Yorker article where he really went into? Do you overall agree with his assessment of who he thinks it is?
Well, he named a specific person, and that specific person has denied emphatically that it's him. And again, I'll take him at his word, and so I assume that's not the person. And so, I don't think that there have been a few other attempts to figure out who it is, and I don't think anyone has really managed to put their finger on the right person.
And if you did, if you accidentally found out who it was, would you publish that? Would you tell people?
Unless there was some compelling reason not to, I think I would. I mean, Satoshi Nakamoto has, has done something in public, created a very public phenomenon, kind of an important, significant phenomenon. I'm not sure that I would necessarily think that Satoshi Nakamoto's right to privacy would trump public interest in who Satoshi Nakamoto is, but I would take it on a, I would look at the specifics, and if maybe there's something I haven't thought about that would make it compelling to not disclose his identity.
What if you found out that you knew who he was and he asked you not to disclose it?
It would depend why he asked me. I mean, it would really depend on the specifics of the case. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a total hardliner. If he convinced me there was a good reason to keep his identity, but I don't know. I'm a journalist. My job is to reveal secrets, not conceal them.
Okay.
Which doesn't mean I never exercise discretion.
Okay, you hear that, Satoshi? So be careful of
Watch
journalists.
it. Watch it, Satoshi.
Watch yourself around journalists.
Watch your back.
Exactly. So I want to remind the audience we're broadcasting live now, and so if you have a question for Benjamin or me, you can text message it right now to 646-580-0099 if you're watching live, or you can do it anytime, 24/7, and we'll try to address your questions on the next episode. But if you do it right now live, we might be able to answer it right here on the show. So it's send a text message, SMS, to 646-580-0099. That's a USA number, +1. Or send an email to feedback@onlyoneTV.com. That's feedback@onlyoneTV.com, all spelled out. Now this is a good time to take a quick break and thank our sponsors, obviously, who bring us to you. And so first we'd like to thank Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox, obviously everybody knows who Mt. Gox is. They're the de facto place to buy and sell Bitcoin online. You can buy Bitcoins and sell Bitcoins back and forth for more than 16 currencies anywhere on the planet, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is the automated online exchange site to buy and sell Bitcoin. They have super security. They have been around the longest. They have been hacked famously, but they are very resilient. They came back. Nobody lost any Bitcoins in any of the hacks either, by the way, except Mt. Gox lost a few. But no account holders actually lost any money, which is very good. They didn't run away and disappear. They're still here. So there's that. And also they have the state of the art in two-factor authentication. They have a little key ring dongle called a USB key. It's a USB key called a YubiKey, YubiKey. And on mountgox.com, you can just click send me a YubiKey. And what that does is it gives you you plug this little USB thing in, and it gives you a secret password that is only good for 2 seconds, I think, or 2 minutes, I forget. Anyway, the point is that even a keyboard capture virus can capture it all at once, and they won't be able to get into your account. So it gives you the state-of-the-art in security. So again, Mt. Gox is, or otherwise known as MTGox, however you want to pronounce it. It's mtgox.com. We thank Mt. Gox for sponsoring the Bitcoin Show. And Thank You Economy by New York Times best-selling author Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk you may know as Gary V on Twitter. He's very famous in social media and Twitter and all that. He is an entrepreneur. He took over his family's liquor business, turned it into a huge wine store online as well as brick and mortar. And he's now written his second book, which is all about how to turn your business, your brand, into to leverage the state of the art in, again, social media. So Twitter, Facebook, and this age of the internet, to use that to bring your business the customer service of yesteryear, like your grandparents' experience from the corner store. So it doesn't matter if your business is small, medium, or very, very large. It's totally scalable, and this is kind of the Bible in how to do that. It's an excellent book. Gary is young but brilliant guy. I've been a huge fan of his way before he became a sponsor. So check it out, thankyoueconomybook.com. It's thankyoueconomybook.com, and read all about it. And love you, Gary Vaynerchuk, big fan. And memorydealers.com. Roger Ver, the founder of memorydealers.com, I gave him the nickname Bitcoin Jesus. He is such a Bitcoin evangelist. And memorydealers.com is one of the largest retailers in the world that accepts Bitcoin and promotes Bitcoin too. They are famous for being one of the largest inventories of fiber optic networking devices, switches, routers, any kind of device that could have anything to do with networking infrastructure, as well as, of course, all types of memory and even Bitcoin mining gear, all sorts of stuff. But check it out, memorydealers.com. I always see the big Bitcoin logo there, and I want to say Bitcoin, but it's memorydealers.com. And they even sell physical forms of Bitcoin, which you can buy with credit cards and PayPal, which is another interesting twist. So anyway, check out memorydealers.com, and we thank Roger Ver, the founder and CEO of Memory Dealers, for his sponsorship of the Bitcoin Show. And we're back. So let's see. Let's check and see if we have any questions. So what would you like to tell the audience? What would you like to say that you haven't already said in your article? You said it all in your article.
I said it all because, I think I was mentioning to you earlier, obviously I'm thrilled to have any members of the Bitcoin community read this article, but it really was for everyone not in the Bitcoin community. It was about the Bitcoin community. And so I think, if you're in the Bitcoin community, you might find this to be a good sort of summary of everything you've already experienced. Mm-hmm. But for people who aren't in the community, it might introduce them to Bitcoin and sort of tell them the short history of it and all. Yeah. It's very eventful short history.
Kind of like a massive Wikipedia of the life of Bitcoin to date.
Something like that.
So what does the future hold? If you're going to write another article 2 years from now, the continuation of Bitcoin, what will it say? What do you predict?
If I knew, I would know whether to sell my Bitcoins or buy more. I think it's very unpredictable. I mean, my hunch for Bitcoin is that it's going to do what I think it has already done somewhat, which is basically find its niche. Like, I don't see Bitcoin personally as overturning the Western financial system. I see it as, occupying a valuable small niche, but a very valuable small niche among people who believe in it and who can use it for certain types of transactions that it really is better than the traditional currency at. Mm-hmm. I mean, in general, I don't think it's a solution. I think someone said, it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And I think to some degree that's true. Like, you can fault the banking system, you can fault central banking, you can talk about, all the issues of money supply and big government and all of that. But basically it works. It works, mm-hmm. With its problems, it works. Mm-hmm. And there's, as one digital currency kind of pioneer said to me, there's an entire trust fabric based on legal mechanisms. And mm-hmm. that's very important. And Bitcoin doesn't necessarily have that. But, I actually think, even though I think sometimes, Bitcoin people don't like to have so much attention paid to the black market uses of it, I think that's actually a great use for Bitcoin. I mean, it's a perfect use for Bitcoin, and it's kind of
it's a big economy.
Is it a big? I mean,
of course, when you talk, drugs. Come on, drugs and gambling and whatever. Look at the mob. I mean, it's a huge economy. Right. You can't deny that.
And I'm not in any way suggesting that I hope that someone will buy an assassination contract using Bitcoins. But for some of for some sort of more harmless gray activity, I think Bitcoin's a good.
Financial privacy.
That's a great use for Bitcoin. I think a great use for Bitcoin is transactions across borders into countries where there's repression, like mm-hmm. China. Mm-hmm. So I just think Bitcoin is going to find all these niche uses that it does better than anything else that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's already true. Like, for sure, it's the cheapest way to send money to China, for example, things like that. I mean, it's the cheapest way to send money anywhere, really. But there are lots of advantages that everybody is quick to point out. A lot of them may be political or philosophical, like you say, freedom, liberty-minded, all that. And also there's the gray and black market and all that, which, I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, I don't really do anything that's even gray market, but it's common sense that when Gawker published the article about Silk Road, the price tripled, right, or something like that. Yeah. So I mean, everybody has a little sense, knows that there's an economy there, and that there is a use. But what's they talk about apps on a platform, and then there's the killer app. I think that there's all these benefits of Bitcoin, but there's the killer benefit. And to me, I think the killer benefit is one that most Bitcoiners underplay, undervalue, under talk about, and that is $45 billion a year is spent each year in the U.S. alone on, do you know?
No.
Credit card fees. Merchants pay credit card fees every time they accept MasterCard, Visa, and forget PayPal. It's crazy. So a total is, I read this on Wallace, so we'll use them as a resource, but they say $45 billion a year, correct me if I'm wrong, is just in the U.S., just on credit card fees alone. Now, that's one thing. And then on top of that, you've got chargebacks 6 months later and all that. Now, like you said, PayPal is really easy. You click, go, you buy it, whatever. I mean, it does work. most of the time, if you overlook the exorbitant fees and you like grumble about them, but you do it anyway, and they close your account in seas and keep all your money twice. That's happened to me, and you're really, really pissed. But it really does work. You're right, and it exists, and there is that infrastructure, and people accept it and all that.
And if someone misuses your credit card information, the credit card company generally makes you whole. So there's some protection there that you don't have with Bitcoin. I just don't see like a non-technical user anytime soon getting into Bitcoin.
Right.
Because it's just too hard. There's too much friction. Even if it becomes easier in one step, that's still like a step beyond what people currently have to take.
Right. So here's what I think. The killer app, if you will, is the transaction fees being virtually zero, and it being cash-like, financial privacy, not traceable, publicly like everything else is, not identity related. Like when you order something online, you have to prove that you are Ben Wallace, or else they won't sell you something. But with this, the only thing they know is, did you pay or did you not pay? Right. And where do you want it sent? Right. Or whatever it is. Right. That's the only thing they care about. So there's no such thing as identity theft. All that's over. It really seems like the future. But this idea hit me the other day. I'm sure I'm not the first one with it. But the problem, the downside of all that is the currency risk, they call it, the value of Bitcoin fluctuating. So here's the idea that I thought of. Like I said, I'm sure I'm not the first one to think of it. But what if Bitcoin is not the thing that you use to buy lunch? You get paid, you get your paycheck in dollars, and the restaurant needs dollars to buy their produce that week, right? But it's the intermediary. I think of it as the Star Trek teleportation thing. You get on the platform and you get, disintegrated into atomic energy or whatever, and then you get rebuilt again on the other side. Imagine if your dollars with one click, get converted into Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what the value is, because your dollars, your $12.85 get converted into Bitcoin, boom, sent, and then they get immediately converted back into dollars again. Now what happened then is that, first of all, the transaction fee is virtually zero, and the currency value doesn't even matter. It could be 2 cents a Bitcoin or $200 a Bitcoin. It doesn't even matter because it's converted. And so it's very stable. You still have the financial privacy because we don't know where you sent it. You just converted it to Bitcoins and sent it, So you have the virtually zero transaction, the irreversible nature of it, the no chargebacks, no credit card fees, and privacy. You have all the benefits, but you have no currency risk. So I think that's going to be the solution. I think that these new apps are going to make it one button, send $12.50, boom, received $12.50. So, there's still banking involved because it's going to have to go, well, not necessarily.
Or exchange, or some intermediary. But
something like, and somehow you have to get the dollars in. But if it's Mt. Gox, for example, you can have US dollars in your Mt. Gox account. Right. And it's still dollars. And it doesn't actually, once it's in Mt. Gox, it doesn't involve any banking.
Right. I will say one of the sort of philosophically interesting things to me about Bitcoin, and what was really interesting about working on it, was just there seems to be some, latent, widespread desire to eliminate the need for trust in the world. Like people have like trust issues or something, and they want, they don't trust the government, they don't trust the bank, and Bitcoin is somehow an answer to this. And if you use Bitcoin, you don't need to trust those people. But as I think this is one of the focuses of my article, is that there's always someone you need to trust, whether it's the exchange, whether it's the merchant. You can't remove the need for trust from the system. And so, I don't know, I do think Bitcoin is some sort of attempt to displace, that need for trust. But as, my Bitcoin showed, a fly-by-night internet storefront is not necessarily more trustworthy than the Federal Reserve.
Right, exactly. But the smart people didn't keep their money in my Bitcoin either. They knew better.
Smart people did keep their money in my Bitcoin. And look at, Stephen Thomas.
Gavin
one of the smartest guys. Such smart people.
Yeah.
And he wasn't in my Bitcoin, but he lost his password for his own desktop wallet. And then some of the other ones, I think he misplaced the wallet. It's so easy at this
point. There was a Dropbox issue. Where
So
Dropbox overwrote the file with the same name.
Right. That's the thing. The people involved in Bitcoin couldn't be smarter, and even they have problems.
Yeah. This early pain, I think we're going to look back at it like the early attempts to create a light bulb. I think that the early pain is where the develop. Well, look, Stephen Thomas is who we're going to have on the next episode, because we're going to talk about, or the one after next, I think. Anyway, about his newest project projects and stuff. He's the one who created the server side. Like there's a whole bunch of new client apps that, I was telling you, they back up and they encrypt the wallet locally and then they back it up on the server. He created the server side, and there's like 2 or 3 or 6 apps that all use the same server engine. He created that. And so out of his pain has this phoenix has arisen of a new technology that is, I'm sure, you have a real passionate interest in making sure this doesn't happen to anybody else.
Sure.
Just like me, I'm such an advocate for security also because of what happened to me. So where was I going to go with that? So these new apps, I think that's the way it is and that's the way it has been, but I see what's coming and as really changing, real game changers. Because if these Android apps and even iPhone web-based apps they're working on, you can literally put in a dollar amount, US dollar amount, hit go, and it sends it through the Bitcoin network. And then the person on the other end, the restaurant or merchant or whatever, can receive it, boom, as US dollars into their whether it's their Mt. Gox account or whatever it is.
Right.
This will make it so easy to do, and all the benefits, ease of use, security,
right,
so that nobody ever loses it again. Like you're saying, there's the theft issue, and you were talking about trust issue. That's what you're talking about, trust. Well, the thing, it seems like the people we trust the least are the governments and the banks, probably the banks who then own the government. But those two entities, we just have absolutely no control over at all, and they're probably the least trusted of all these potential parties. And so that's the one thing Bitcoin does sort of eliminate. Buyers and sellers have to trust each other. If I'm buying something from cash,
I trust my bank and I trust the U.S. government more than I trust Tom Williams.
Well, that's true. That's the thing. But once again, Tom Williams was a bank. That was a bank. It was basically a Bitcoin bank. So it's like, they have these know your customer laws. I say, well, know your banker is even more important than them knowing their customer. You're the one giving them the money.
But Tom Williams is not subject to FDIC. He's not subject to government regulation. Exactly. So that's why, I'm not. Exactly. I don't know. I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in that I recognize there are huge problems with our banking system and with our government, but it's still better than the alternative, which is anarchy and people just fly-by-night businesses that don't have no regulation.
Yeah, okay, yeah. There's, regulation is one of those tricky words, it's like love. It's like you could be taken way many different ways. But regulation is, even the most liberty-minded people are pro-regulation when it comes to eliminating monopolies, for example. So regulation depends on what kind of regulation and what are you regulating and all that stuff. It's just such a vague term. But I see what you're saying. Obviously, you don't trust a stranger. That just goes without saying. So that my Bitcoin, it's obviously an example we had to learn. It's a, what do you call it, a wildcat bank.
Pain
it's like the Wild West with a wildcat banks. You put up a sign, bank, and then you take everybody's money for 6 months and then skip town. This is something we had to learn that, that's right. This is not a traceable credit card thing that can be reversed. This is cash. So we all whoever got burned. But okay, so aside from that issue, with the current state of it, assuming we've learned that lesson, we still have to trust. The buyer has to trust the seller, or the seller has to trust the buyer. If I'm buying something cash, if I'm buying, whatever, say you made some handcrafted leather good, I'm buying it for a briefcase for cash, then I have to trust you're going to send me the briefcase and I'm going to send you the cash. Right. We either meet in person and we do it at the same time, or I have to make sure that the cash is real, whatever. There's always trust. So I would say don't ever do business with somebody you don't trust. Like, that's easier said than done, though, especially in the gray market or something. You don't trust anybody. And online, you don't know who you're dealing with. But so there's where Bitcoin, we always have to remember it's cash-like, because when if you're selling something, it eliminates the need to trust because they're sending you cash and you got the Bitcoin, you got it. But the buyer has to trust you. So that's why there's these, escrow services have sprung up and different things like that. Mm-hmm. It's a different way of doing business. But in general, I think that usually when there's things being sold online, there's a merchant that has many customers. It's a one-to-many relationship with the merchant having many customers. And if it's different. Craigslist one-to-one is different, and that's going to be tricky. But and then you're going to have reputation and escrow and all that, and you still might get burned. But if there's a merchant, an online store, then it's less likely that the store is going to rip you off. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit less likely because they have a reputation to uphold.
Right.
A random customer is just, they don't know you from Adam. But the idea then is the customer sends the payment, then the store responds with the products, and the store maintains its reputation. The customer doesn't have to worry about a reputation because nobody knows them.
Right.
So that's a good thing. With credit cards and PayPal, the stores get ripped off. The merchants get ripped off. I think the merchants should be the biggest advocates of Bitcoin because merchants get ripped off constantly. People reverse credit card charges 6 months later, 5 months later, and say that they say that they're I was never in New York. I don't know what you're talking about. Whatever. And American Express says, well, they're a platinum card customer. We always side with them. It doesn't matter what the facts are.
Right.
You could have their thumbprint and their notarized contract. Doesn't matter. You know. So merchants get screwed, really. They do. And so I think merchants should be a huge advocate of Bitcoin. And if these apps, these new apps, can tie it in so that there's absolute security. And speaking of trust, banks and institutions and all that, I think people say, in cryptography we trust. You've seen that slogan. I think that we trust in Bitcoin's cryptography and the free open source software part of it. So if these apps, especially if the apps are free open source software, and everybody can see the source code and we know that it is what it says it is,
right.
that that's probably the most trustworthy thing other than yourself. Which you can't even trust yourself. Some people need to be protected from themselves.
Absolutely.
Even these technologists, like we were saying. So,
so do you see more merchants and retailers just in the New York area using Bitcoin? I mean,
not lately. Like you say, there's been a waning interest in it. It all has to do with the value. When the value is going up, everybody's in a buzz about it, and then the value going up makes the media attention, which makes it go up, and all that. And then, like you say, it spirals up. Speculation and all that, and media interest makes more merchants interested. But so I think it's going to be slow. I think it's going to be a more slow, natural, organic growth, which is actually good. I think people who really understand Bitcoin think that that's a good thing, because if it grows like exponentially and explodes, it's dangerous.
Right.
It's much better to be slow and like a business growing. It's much better to be slow and steady, plodding along in its growth. The way MasterCard and Visa did. You're not old enough to remember, but I remember when stores didn't take MasterCard and Visa. It was a real exception to have a logo, a great big logo, and it wasn't both. It was one or the other. They were competing, and there were several others, diners and all that. Yeah, there would be a big thing, MasterCard, and it was a real exceptional thing to find a place that took a credit card, especially a standardized credit card that was more than one store, because Macy's, whatever, department stores had their own credit card. They kind of started the thing, and then this MasterCard and what came along, and then later Visa and so on. And it was really an exceptional thing, and it took many, many, many years for that to catch on. And it was only credit, of course, way before debit. But the point is that I don't want Bitcoin to grow that slowly, but if it grows more organically and slowly and steadily, I think it will be better and healthier, and people will be able to trust it more. The apps are going to mature very quickly. It's kind of like civil rights. You say it's really, really, things are changing fast, but not fast enough. That's it. It's growing fast, but not fast enough. And it's kind of a crazy thing. When you look back at how much things have changed in civil rights, for example, and for African Americans and gay rights and things like that. If you look back 10 years, you look back 20 years, wow, it's amazing how much it's changed, but not fast enough. It couldn't be fast enough. Same thing with Bitcoin. I would love for every retailer to accept Bitcoin online and offline, brick and mortar and everything. But these things have to be solved. And a lot of it has to do with the software development, which is ready. I think it's just about ready now because it had to address security, which I think these do now. And it has to address the currency risk, which I think these things do, because you can convert dollars to Bitcoins, Bitcoins to dollars instantly. And with those two things in place, and then more and more ease of use, I think it will spread fast.
It's going to be very interesting to watch.
Hopefully it won't go, from $2 to $30 and then back again, repeatedly. But it probably will. Who knows? Who knows? As more and more people talk about it. So, thanks. We have to do this again for sure.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Bruce.
We shouldn't wait another year. We have to do this, more often and see what's up.
Great.
Are you going to write any more stories about Bitcoin?
I mean, I don't have any assigned right now, but who knows? You know, if a whole bunch more activity starts happening with it, conceivably.
Okay. Well, stay in touch for sure. Come to the meetups.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
Great.
Ben.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. See you guys next time. Thanks for joining us. Know him, but he's our guest today. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Bruce. Good
How
to
are
be
you?
here. Good. Thanks.
You good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. You were basically an embedded journalist into the Bitcoin community here in New York, right? I mean, you were hanging out at all the meetups and
Yep.
the convention, the conference, everything.
Yep.
Do you always get so immersed in your story?
When I have the luxury to, time-wise, and also when the subject is so interesting that I want to spend as much time in it as I can, and Bitcoin was one of the most interesting stories I've worked on in a while.
And how long did you work on writing this story?
I mean, the actual writing of it maybe a week, but the reporting and research was several months. I'm trying to probably 3 months.
That's what I thought, about 3 months.
Yeah.
Just research and note taking and all that, and then
Just talking to a lot of people, coming to your meetups, coming to the convention, buying some Bitcoins and playing around with them to sort of see what it was like to buy them, to see what it was like to use them and store them, and just expose myself to Bitcoin. I pretty much get the daily digest of what's going on.
Yeah.
I also receive, the Bitcoin Google group digest.
Bitcoin
So yeah,
Google.
I mean, I'm generally up on it,
Yeah.
but I haven't been as immersed in it as I was.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so all right.
I keep watching to see if my Bitcoins are going to,
Yeah.
regain the value they had when I bought them. But
Exactly. So I want to talk about that too. Well, speaking of that, that's what I wanted to talk about is the title, the rise and fall of Bitcoin. There's so much power in a title, and I don't know what, I'm making this number up, but I'm guessing at least half the people who see an article somewhere just read the title and don't have time to read the article. Question, did you come up with the title, or was that assigned by...
Yeah, I did not come up with a title, but I also, I think it's a fair title. I mean, I think that, a big point of a headline is to get people to read the story. So,
Right.
You're definitely going to err on the side of making it interesting, making it dramatic.
Yeah.
Having said that, I mean, if you look at Bitcoin just in terms of its valuation, it clearly has had a dramatic rise and fall. I understand that there are people in the community who might object to saying that it has fallen because it's still here and they view the rise as a bubble in the first place. But on the other hand, I don't think that fall means death. It's not the
Right.
rise and death of Bitcoin. And it could be, the next chapter could be another rise. But I do think that in certain pretty important senses, there has been a fall.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. So the only reason I ask is, well, because of that, you basically said it, is that it can be read, and I guess that's the cleverness of a title, that it makes it newsy, that it's like, oh, it's dramatic and whatever. And does that mean it's dead, or does that mean the price rose and fell? And how do you could take it more than one way.
Sure.
Obviously, the price has risen and fallen. So on that level, there's that issue, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then the other is like the death of Bitcoin. But obviously, it's not dead.
Obviously, it's not dead.
Right.
I mean, there's certainly, I think there are some other ways in which you could say there's been a rise and fall. Certainly in terms of media, exposure and interest, I think there was a rise and fall. I mean, there was a real intense sort of media point in as many different ways as I could.
Cool. So, I mean, obviously I look at you as a friend because you're just like another one of the Bitcoin guys here in New York. I mean, everybody knows you here, but people around the world may not have seen you yet, only your name. But I was going to say, how had you heard of Bitcoin before? Like, were you assigned this story, or did you pitch this story?
I was assigned this story. I'd never heard of Bitcoin.
Really?
I write about all different sorts of things, not tech specifically. I mean, I've written for Wired before, but not a lot. And my editor said, "Hey, have you heard of Bitcoin?" And I said no, and he started telling me about it, and it sounded so interesting that I was excited to work on it, but it was the first I'd heard of it.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long ago how long before you started the story? Was that like right away?
And that's right away, and then I
And then
kind of
boom,
got going
right away you started
boom,
researching it.
Yeah, maybe a couple of
Wow.
weeks, but yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. All right, now since you finished writing the story, and it's on the newsstands now, Have you stayed involved in what's going on with Bitcoin, or just?
I mean, I have a Bitcoin Google alert, so I am pretty.
Today's episode of the Bitcoin Show is brought to you by Mt. Gox and Thank You Economy Book and MemoryDealers.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bitcoin Show. I'm Bruce Wagner, as you know, and today we have really big news. You may have walked past a newsstand and seen the December issue of Wired magazine. Well, right here, it's all about Bitcoin. So it's an article called The Rise and Fall of Bitcoin by a man named Benjamin Wallace. And those of you in the New York Bitcoin community probably